Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very happy to be here with you today and glad you can join us. Today, we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and working remotely. On this episode, I'm going to talk about the impact of the coronavirus has had on workers and also organizations. We're going to talk about the current situation of balancing life, work, family, and more. We're going to talk about some of the effects of remote working, the challenges of remote working, essential equipment for you to work remotely, and I'm going to help you with your remote working strategy. Very happy to be here with you today. Saturday for me is a great day of the week to reflect on my strategy, and hopefully it's a good time for you to reflect on your strategy as well. Our show is growing. We're available on iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and more. So if you'd like to listen to a replay of this podcast, or if you'd like to go listen to prior episodes, you can find them there. You can find me on most social media platforms. My Twitter handle is @HawkinsJohn, and my website is johnmhawkins.com. Just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and a plan to help us reach our goals, because the best laid plans don't always work. And this week, I'm looking for your stories on working remotely. Do you have any good examples, a tip or a trick? If you send it to talk@johnmhawkins.com, that's talk@johnmhawkins.com, we can start the conversation there. Well, as with any strategy we talk about in our intro, the best laid plans don't always work. There was a bit of a wrinkle thrown into our plans, and this was the forcing function of the COVID-19 virus, what it has done not only to our healthcare workers and our current situation, but it's also forced a lot of people to work remotely. This pandemic has caused havoc. It's threatening lives and forcing remote work. I think first and foremost, it's important for us to think about those on the front line. Their health, their safety is the number one priority. If they do not do their job to try and thwart the virus, there isn't much more to focus on. So at that point, I think it's very important for us to think about them and provide any support we can, whether it's emotional support, financial support, to help decrease the spread of this. What has this done? It's caused an impact on many other workers, because with stay-at-home, social distancing, many workers who were in their businesses have been forced to work from home. And as a result of that, not only are they having to deal with working from home, but many people have their children who are out of college, out of schools, so they're now going to be homeschooling their children. You may have parents that are home that need help, or grandparents who came in and helped, and now they're social distancing, so they can't help. So in today's episode, we're really going to focus on working remote and what we need to be successful. This is for those folks who are newly into a working remote situation, and hopefully I can give you some tips and tricks to help you be as successful as you can. And I think that this strategy is something that you're going to want to put into play not only for the near term, but this is a strategy that is going to be necessary going forward, because you never know when, number one, this virus is going to hit its curve and start to slow its progression. But also, if you look at previous viruses, they have come back in several waves. So today we're going to be talking about our work from home strategy. Going to give you some ideas, but I think this is something that everybody needs to prepare for. We're going to talk about, as I stated, the basic equipment, what you need. Talk about distractions when working from home, about the family obligations, the refrigerator, procrastinating, sleeping too much, and more. We're going to talk about ways to stay motivated at home, things you can do to stay motivated, such as wearing work clothes, waking up earlier, setting alarms, making lists, avoiding TV, and scheduling your day. And then we're going to put together a strategy to help you be as effective as you can in this time. So we're talking about the pandemic, COVID-19, and those who have been forced to work from home. I've got an article here by Michelle Kliss. She's talking about the advantages of working from home, but there's also some disadvantages. She says here that, now with the World Health Organization elevating the coronavirus outbreak from an epidemic to a pandemic, millions of businesses are forcing to contend with the prospect of managing completely remote work. Major companies like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and Google have already implemented remote work policies for many of their employees. And so what they're doing is they're going through some of the pros and cons here. But I think it's so important for us to realize as we think about our strategy that this is just not about having the technical tools to do your job. You are going to lose the human connection. You are not going to be with your coworkers, with your peers, with your boss on a daily basis. So everything is going to change. How are you going to go about staying motivated? How do you get feedback from a job well done or when you need to take corrective action? So all of these things are going to be an issue. So they talk about some of the top 10 advantages, and I'm going to go through these quickly, but lots of advantages. You have a flexible schedule. Just take a break at any time you want. Custom environment. Set up your noise level just the way you want it. Somewhere between insanely quiet to being in the front row at a concert. Cozy clothes. You can wear sweatpants from college. Other things that are, you can be relaxed in. It's easier for you to make calls. You don't have to scramble to find a conference room. Or knock off some weekend to-dos. For those of you who have things to do on the weekend, maybe sneak it in during the week. No office distractions. You can avoid your coworkers debating the merits of their own personal interests. Zero commuting. You can basically roll out of bed and end up at work minutes later. Save money. Lunch is expensive. And if you work in a large city, why not just save money there and go to the refrigerator? Forget about crowds and traffic. More time with those loved ones. So those are some of the advantages, they say, but there's also some disadvantages. And we're going to go through a lot more about these disadvantages later in the show. Willpower is a disadvantage. You got to get started on new projects, but a new Netflix season was released. Difficulty sticking to a routine. I think this is a big one, right? If you're used to going into work, now having to do it remotely. Missing important calls. Calling Uber Eats, power naps, boredom, working too slow, not having the second monitor or other tools that you need. Your Wi-Fi, this is a huge one. If you've not upgraded your Wi-Fi and working remote, call your provider. Get that upgraded immediately. And you're waiting for an answer because you don't have somebody there. So those are some of the advantages and disadvantages, according to Michelle Kliss, with regard to or regarding working from home. So that really is the premise of the show today and what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what does it take for us to put together a strategy to be able to work from home. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My name is John Hawkins. The show is My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Happy to be here with you today and glad you can join us. My Strategy episodes are live, and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're talking about COVID-19 and working remotely. As a result of the outbreak, social distancing and forced isolation has caused many workers and organizations to mandate that their employees work from home. So right before the break, we were talking about the forcing function of COVID-19 and this virus and how it is causing people to work remote. We went through some of the pros and cons and benefits of working from home. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the basic equipment one might need to work from home, because as you can imagine, if you have not worked from home or don't do it on a regular basis, you might not know exactly what you will need. And while we're talking about a number of things today, one of those things is the tools. It's the things that you're going to need to be effective to be able to work from home. So it really comes down to the tools, the people in your life is another aspect, and finally, the process and getting that in place. So from a tools perspective, I've got an article here by Alyssa Gregory, and she talks about 17 items you need to set up an efficient home office. She says when you begin to set up your home office, one of the two things tend to happen. Either unable to easily identify what equipment and technology you use every day, so you underestimate what you will need to get your office up and running, and quickly find yourself struggling. Or you clearly see in each individual item you may need and are overwhelmed by the thought of all those needs and determining what is a staple and what is not a staple. So she put together this checklist, and I'm going to go through it. There's some things I'd change about it, but that's just me. Also, you can go through your own situation and determine what is most important to you. She says a computer's important. This will apply to almost everyone since we need to have them. And I'm going to add to her list a webcam. So you need a webcam. And if you have a webcam and you don't want to seem dingy and you want to seem light and full of life, I suggest getting some lighting too to support that. That way, when you're using your video conferencing, people can see you for who you are, and which means that you have to have a background that's pleasing to the eye and other things. So a computer, webcam, being able to do video calls is extremely important. She also suggests that you have a secondary monitor and a larger monitor to be able to give you the ability to maintain proper sitting posture, because I think that's important. Many of us who've traveled the globe working from laptops and in all sorts of various situations, it's very easy to get poor posture. You're not exercising, you're on flights, and as a result, you develop aches and pains. So it's important to make sure that ergonomically you've got a desk in place to support that. High-speed internet access, the ability to connect to the world is important. And I'd mentioned this first thing in the show, but always check with your provider. Many times they aren't letting you know that higher internet speeds are available, but if you check with them, they can upgrade those speeds for you. Absolutely worth the investment, especially when you start to do more and more video work, or if you start to do more and more work from home. Having a nice desk is important, something that's ergonomic. I've got a variable desk, so the desk has the ability to rise, so I could stand, I can sit. That's a great thing to have in your office. Chair. So have a chair that supports you and what you want to do. I think that being able to stand, being able to sit, being able to change your posture is extremely important. She says also adequate lighting. I mentioned this with the webcam, but having good lighting that helps you with not only your mood, but being able to see your work is important. Telephone and or voice IP. So, have a secondary phone. That used to be important. It's not so important now, but that's something to consider. Software. What about the software that you're going to be needing? Well, for those of you who are working remote from a business, hopefully your company's providing that, but you may need additional subscriptions to support that. Another item she lists here is a network router. And I think this is important because especially if you're sharing the network with other family members in the home, the router is going to give you the ability to dedicate traffic to a specific room in the house as opposed to just using Wi-Fi and having it hardwired, which could help with your productivity. She talks also about surge protector, which is important. You could also, I'm going to add here a UPS, universal power supply. Being able to protect your equipment. You're not in the office, so if anything happens, whether it's a brownout or blackout, you want to have that protection for your gear. Printer and multi-purpose machine. I think that stands to reason. We don't print as much as we used to. Well, I do. I mean, I've got tons of printouts. I don't know why. I think I just enjoy the feeling of the paper, but and also you can mark it up pretty easily. But having a printer, a backup drive or personal server, I think this is important because as you have information on your computer, it's important to have a cloud storage device to back it up to. She does mention the UPS, the uninterrupted power supply. File cabinet's important because as you're working from home, you're going to start to collect things with regard to these papers you're printing. So being able to store certain things, having a good storage cabinet with your sticky notes, your pens, your paper, your folders, your ink, other things that you may take for granted at an office place. Now you have to be the person to maintain them, so you're going to need to do that. She also suggests a fire safe box, something that you can put important papers to store in the event that something unfortunate happens at your home. When we're at work, we've got fire sprinklers and the like. At home, you don't have those sprinklers, so hopefully you've got smoke alarms, but that's something to be thinking about. And finally, a paper shredder, she suggests, to be able to destroy any sensitive or confidential information. So, I think that's a good starting point of things that you do need in the office. Really, it's going to come down to, what your role is, what you're doing. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a list of things, Alyssa Gregory gives us some good starting points regarding what we might need to start working from home. So hopefully, now your employer might be able to provide these, but if you're not used to working remote, it's going to take time for them to come up with these offices in a box. So you might need to improvise for a while. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about distractions when working from home. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Today, we're talking about the impact of working remotely as a result of COVID-19 outbreak. We're talking about the impact the coronavirus has had on workers and organizations and what we've had to do to pivot to be able to support this. Right before the break, we were talking about some of the basic equipment you might need to work from home and be successful. On this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the distractions that you can get when you are working from home. Now, I'm sure many of you who have been put into this situation where now you are working from home, you didn't appreciate what it was like to have that environment at work that was dedicated purely to work and had all of your creature comforts for work and your amenities. Once you come home and you're working from home, your home hat gets put on, and you start thinking about all the things that you need to be doing at home. So I've got an article here by Liv Alexis Plachet. She says, working from home is not a walk in the park, especially if you have small children, teenagers in the house all the time. The reality is that it's hard to make it work. You need an extraordinary amount of discipline, self-control, and organizational skills. Without these, productivity will remain low, and income-generating potential will severely be constrained. The freedom that working at home offers, time with the family, no dress code, no strict schedules and deadlines, no glowering bosses, can be a double-edged sword. The same thing that we all do for a home business environment can serve as distractions if we don't control them. So she comes up with a list of some of the big distractions, the top 10 as she sees it. She says family obligations. When you're working from home, it allows you to take care of both the family and business. But at the same time, what about all those home chores? What if you have a young child? What if you have school-age children, teenagers? What about elderly or parents who are in the home? Additionally, you might be living with brothers, sisters, anyone else in the home, and they're used to the home and what you do at home, and now they need to start to adapt to what it is that you're doing. So she says working on business requires focus and energy. Focus and energy. And I think that's right, because you have to start setting expectations. If you're going to be in your home office, it's important to have quiet time during those important phone calls. And as a result of that, if you don't have the quiet time and you've not set that expectation, it can cause stress, friction, etc. What about a frequent visit to the refrigerator or pantry? She says frequently eating is one of the biggest distractions for the home-based entrepreneur. With a refrigerator or kitchen a few steps away, you might get into the habit of munching all the time. I think this is important. Many organizations have their own pantries and kitchens set up. But, when you're in meetings and you're sitting through meetings and getting through your day, you might take a break once or twice a day and go pick something up. But if the refrigerator is only a few feet away, it's something that you can go do easily, and it can be a distraction. She says too much sleeping. The key to getting things done is to be awake, and while you may decide to sleep in, take a nap, stay up late, that can all impact your performance. So it's important to not sleep as much, or at least set your schedule. What about procrastinating? Working at home sometimes feels like a vacation. No schedules, no deadlines. Plus, you're the boss at home. However, the whole thing can be overwhelming and scary. I think that's important. Is when you're procrastinating and not doing something, that can lead to you not getting your work done. But also in prior podcasts, we've also learned that when you procrastinate, it might be because you're unsure about the direction to take. So having a little bit of clarity in your day and figuring out exactly what it is that you need to do can definitely help. So all these podcasts tie together. And so we can go back to some of those and look at some of those lessons that we learned. Unnecessary phone calls. Calling a friend to network is good for business. However, when you talk to a friend for 2 hours about anything, it can be therapeutic and relaxing, but you're not going to be getting your work done. Watching too much TV. From daytime soaps to courtroom dramas, television is one of the biggest distractions when working from home. And I think also it's not only TV, but live streaming and other things. If you've got a favorite, pastime or something that you like to do, just sneaking in that one episode might not seem like a big deal. The problem is that when it starts to take you away from what you need to do, it can impact performance reviews. It can impact other things as well. Getting sloppy. One of the advantages from working from home is freedom. You don't have to get dressed up. You don't need to, wear your power suit, etc. But when you get sloppy and don't take care of yourself, that can impact you mentally and can also get you to a point where you just don't feel as good about yourself. Also, cleanliness is important. Making sure that you have a clean work environment and that you clean that up on a regular basis can help. You're not going to have anybody coming in to wipe down your desk, to empty your trash. So it's very important to, start to develop those good habits. What about too many unnecessary activities? Reading the paper while sipping coffee, going and doing a computer game, web surfing, etc. Social media, anything along those lines can keep you from getting your work done. When you're in the work environment, you're not going to bring up your favorite show. You're not going to be doing a lot of social media because there's eyes watching you. There's people who can see what you're doing. And so, but when you are at home, how do you regulate that? What's the process to be able to do that? And that's something you're going to have to develop. If you don't, you can get stuck into some of these traps. She says here that number 9, and this is an interesting one, but drinking alcohol while working. Occasionally drinking is not bad, like a glass of wine or lunch, or like a glass of wine during lunch or beer while working on another client's program. But if you're doing that at home, that is definitely something that can get you into a situation, right, where you're not out socially taking a client out. You are at home trying to get things done, and that can definitely, drinking impacts your judgment. So you got to be careful about that, especially if you're working for somebody else. And finally, working too much on the other end of the spectrum. People who work from home find themselves not being able to pull away from work. So those are some tips from Liv Alexis on distractions when working from home. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about tips to help you stay motivated while working from home. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Happy to be here with you today. And if you're just joining the show, our episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I would love to get your thoughts. You can send us an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. And this week we're talking about working from home as a result of the COVID-19 virus. We're talking about the impact coronavirus has had on workers and organizations. We're talking about the current situation of balancing life, work, family, and more. We're examining the effect of remote work, the challenges of working remote, essential equipment you need, and we're helping you to build a remote working strategy. And I must say that I think that we need to really start thinking about this, because even once we get past this first wave, you never know when you're going to be asked to go back home, potentially for a second or perhaps third wave of this. So we all need to be thinking about how can we get our work done? How can we put in the right infrastructure, have the right process, and have our support team in place to be able to make us as successful as we can? Because there are some benefits from working from home, but there's also some pitfalls that we need to avoid. And because we're all about personal development, I want you to have every tool that you need to be as successful as you can. Right before the break, we were talking about some distractions that you might have working at home. In this segment, I want to talk about some tips to stay motivated at home, right? Because even if you've got your infrastructure, your high-speed internet, your webcam, your lighting systems, your clean desk, you've got your backup, your UPS, you've got cloud storage, you've got everything, right? We still need to stay motivated at home. So I've got an article here. This is actually from Thrive. And it says, it's called Tips for Working from Home. And I'll go through some of these. And I did go through many articles. And this one just seemed to have a lot of the common tips that we need to have to work from home. So I might augment these a little bit, but from my perspective, that did do a good representation of some of the other articles that I'd found. So it says here, working from home is a great way to eliminate your commute, boost your mood, and get some much-needed self-care. For many business owners, their home is also their office. And while the benefits of working remotely can be great, it's often a struggle to stay productive with so many possible distractions. Rather than losing work hours by playing with your pets or getting that extra hour of sleep, use your work from home time to stay organized, tackle your goals, maintain a healthy work-life balance. So they're giving us 10 tips to work from home. The first one they have here is change into work clothes. Change your clothes, actually. Get into some sort of, it doesn't have to be full-on office attire, but if you just get up out of bed and stay in your pajamas until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, it isn't really going to get you into that mood, that work mode. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've got teenagers, I've got a college student, and that's one of those challenges when they're now need to be homeschooled and they have digital learning days. And that's one of those things that I've noticed. They've started to sleep in more, like it's a Saturday. They've started to, not get dressed as soon as they should. So, what I do if I'm working from home, I still get up early in the morning. I still shower. I still eat breakfast, and I'm fully dressed by the time I need to get on a call. Now, that's my own personal preference. I like to be prepared. I like to feel like I'm ready to go for the day. But for others, they can maintain it. And that's where the strategy is up to you. I might suggest you get into working clothes and to help you get into the mood of working, have your breakfast, everything you would normally do before your commute. And if you are having problems, it's something to try. They also say, what about waking up earlier? If you've got an hour-long commute, a 30-minute commute, whatever your commute was, and rather than having that long commute, you say, oh, great, I'm going to get an extra hour of sleep. So I'm going to get an extra hour of sleep so I don't have to commute. And that means I can stay up an extra hour or maybe 2 hours at night. Well, now you've thrown your whole schedule off. So from that perspective, it's important to really be cognizant about when are you waking up? What is your schedule? What are the things that you're going to be doing on a daily basis to be able to maintain your effectiveness at the workplace? From my perspective, we're going to go through some of these tips at a later point, but really laying out the day, and you have to be more organized than you are, from my perspective, at work, because you need to set up a schedule to have regular check-ins, to be able to meet with people at work, to be able to get work done. You can't just walk around the office and find so-and-so and get stuck in a 2-hour-long conversation. You might, but you could still get work done in that conversation. But when you're remote, you have to force those conversations. Avoid the TV, streaming services, and more. I think that this is a good one. Set your work hours throughout the day. And when you are working, find a place that is conducive for work, right? We talked about having a desk. I've got a variable desk, having good posture throughout the day. If you don't do that and you don't get into that habit, pretty soon you're going to have to go to the doctor and say, my shoulders hurt, my neck hurts. And they find out, well, why? And it's because you're sitting on your couch with your laptop and you're hunched over and you're working as you would. When at work, they pay a lot of money to have your desk properly fit to your height, your chair, etc. So we need to start thinking about those things as we are working from home. Setting alarms, staying focused and on track is important. So set alarms and keep yourself, prepare virtual meetings you have, take lunch breaks. Keep the regularity that you would have had at the office. It is going to help you so much by having that schedule, by planning. I take my lunch at this time. I take a break at this time. I need exercise, right? You're not walking, you're not going out for lunch, so you need to get your exercise. Take a walk around the block. You need to set the schedule and force it. What about a log out of social medias? Yeah, that's a good one. Make lists, and I'm a huge list maker, so I do support that. Very important to come up with your lists. Take breaks. Stay connected with your team, and know when your day ends. And I think that's an important one. Many times when working from home, you get up early, you go through the meetings, you take your lunch, you've got work to do in the afternoon, and then come the end of the day, it's like, well, I guess I could just get a few things done for tomorrow. It's great to get a few things done for tomorrow, but really time box it so that you aren't spending 2 and 3 hours preparing for the next day. But, do what you can to get it done in 30 to 45 minutes or so. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about developing your strategy. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. The show is My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Love to get your thoughts. Send us an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. Let us know how we're doing. Give us a subject or topic. This week, we're specifically looking from working from home tips and tricks. And this week, we've been talking about COVID-19 and the impact on working remotely. And focusing on how the coronavirus has had an impact on workers and organization. Right before the break, we were talking about tips to stay motivated at home. Good things like setting an alarm, avoiding the TV, getting dressed, ready for work. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about developing your strategy. Now, I have a process that I go through to develop a strategy, and we talk about this every week on the show. It's a 5-step process. It's the awareness. What's our vision? What's our goals? What are we trying to achieve? And in this case, we all have become aware that we need to social distance and be able to and be remote. And because of that, we still have work that needs to be done. So we have become aware that there is a need for us to be able to work anywhere in the globe, specifically at home. So we know there's a need. Next step, number 2, is assess and analyze. By looking at that situation, we can analyze and figure out what steps to take. Well, if now you're sitting at home, what are the needs that you have? You want to assess it. And so from that perspective, do you have the right equipment in place? Do you have the right support from people, family, friends? Do you have systems in place to support those who are in the house? Have you set proper expectations, et cetera, et cetera? So that is what we need to be doing as we start to strategize and plan. Before you can do any of that and say, oh, I'm going to go out and buy, a new network. I'm going to go out and buy a new router. I'm going to buy a new computer. I'm going to go buy this, that, and the other. No, it's really understanding and assessing where you are in your current situation. And I'm telling you, this is what all businesses, successful businesses, do. It's what successful people do. You have to assess and analyze where you are. Once you've got that good assessment, and this doesn't have to be pages and pages of work, but once you've got a good idea of where you are and what you need to focus on, now you can start to strategize and plan. What is the critical path for you? Do you need additional infrastructure? Do you need additional hardware? Do you have, are you going to get into some bad habits and you need to have more structure in your day? So what are the things you can do to put structure in the day? If you are self-employed, you probably already are doing this, but if you are newly working remote, have the open, honest dialogues with your employer, because ultimately there's going to be many other employees who are going to be put in this same remote work situation. And it's up to the team to come up with the strategy and the way to mitigate this and working remote. So be very open and honest and just share with people where you are. And they might, your boss might have the same situation, where because that's part of it, right? When you're at work, you have social engagement, you have water coolers, you have coffee machines, but you're not going to have that at home. And so it might be important for your team to have virtual video conferences twice a week in place of the one weekly call that you guys did. But your boss, who isn't used to doing remote working and working virtually, doesn't know that. So at this transition point, at the inflection point, it is incredibly important to have open, clear dialogues with your team, with your managers, so that you all can come up with a strategy and a plan to make this successful. If you all of a sudden find yourself needing something that's on the equipment list, and you need an upgraded internet, you need a printer, you need a desk, shouldn't you let the employer know and find a way to either have the employer pay for that, or perhaps you could work out a deal? It's expensive to go through and buy all these things on the list to have your home office. And that's a financial burden that it might not be fully for you to take on. So have that conversation, because you shouldn't feel like, now that you're working from home, you're forced to take on all the financial responsibility and the burden. Many organizations are going to help you with that. So when you're strategizing, when you're planning, involve your team members, those who you are working with. That is incredibly important. And it's not just setting up the structural things, but it's also maintaining your office cleanliness. If I had a Lego set on my desk and I looked at the Lego set, odds are I'm thinking, what can I build with the Lego set? And so if I'm trying to do a podcast and I've got the Lego set, well, my mind's going to, I could build a house, or I could build a little car, or I could build that. Well, let's say I had the Lego set on my desk, and then I had, something else on my desk, like I had a squishy ball. And then I'm thinking, well, I'm supposed to be doing a podcast, but I could build a car. Oh, I could squish my, ball for stress relief. If you end up with all these things cluttered on your desk, where do you think your mind is going to go to? So from that perspective, as you strategize and plan, think about your work environment. Think about what is the optimal place for you to work. And actually, that's one of those tenets that I covered specifically in my most recent book, Coach to Greatness. And a lot of those tips and developing your environment, it's something as simple as having soundproofing in your office can really help you from a work perspective. Making sure that those others in the house know your work timelines, so that they know when you're on important phone calls, so that they can set and plan their day accordingly. So as we start to think about this strategy and this plan, it's very important for us to really assess where we are. And, one of the things that I also want to talk about, and we're not going to have a ton of time to cover everything on this show today. But Allison Martin had an interesting piece on strategies to survive working from home with children. And I think a lot of these tips are important because they not only are good for children, but for roommates. What if you have roommates that want to come over and have a party during the day? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. But we need to have those boundaries put in place. So she says, be realistic, have talks, come up with emergency drills, designate an area in your home for this work. Work a graveyard shift, use time wisely, be flexible, solicit assistance of family and friends, take a break, become an early riser, hire a nanny, to-do list, activities, plan ahead, adjust your workspace, work on the weekend, etc. So there's lots and lots of tips out there and tricks that we can use to be able to become effective remote workers. I know many of us are put in this position, but if we have put some time into assessing it and coming up with a plan, we can definitely be successful together. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about putting your plan in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. My Strategy episodes are live. They're on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Love to get your thoughts, so send us an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. Today we've been talking about an important topic, COVID-19 and the impact on working remotely. In this episode, we've been talking about the impact on workers and organizations, the current situation of balancing life, work, family, and more. We're talking about building an effective remote work strategy. I think first and foremost, it's important to realize that nobody expected a pandemic. Nobody expected that this virus could wreak havoc on not only to threaten the lives of those people in this world, but also it has completely stopped, in many cases, work. As a result of that, social distancing and keeping people safe, we are now being forced to work remote if we have that option. Many don't have that option, and they're not able to work at all. So our hearts go out to all those on the front line and those who are unable to participate in this economy. But health and safety is number one. So for all of those who are able to work remote, this week we've been talking about ways to do it effectively. Parents, though, are now forced to homeschool their children because colleges, high schools, elementary schools, grade schools have sent their children home. Also, daycare has limited their ability to watch children. And it's workers are forced to deal with not only having to learn how to work from home, but also they still have to do everything that they did in their daily lives. So we talked a little bit about what are some of the basic equipment that you need. We talked about the computer, the monitor, the webcam, high-speed internet, lighting, voice over IP software, and other essential assets that you might not be thinking about or take advantage of when you are in a work environment. Well, those are all things that you're going to need to have at home, and you don't have them. And if your company doesn't have a work-from-home policy in place, most likely they are in a situation where they are scrambling, trying to figure out how to make all of this work. We know that when you do work from home, or you are home, you're in a certain routine. There's patterns. There's things that you do when you are home. When you're at work, you do things at work. You're in a habit, in a routine. So what we've done is we've conflated our work process and our home process, and now we have tension. We have stress in the system. There's family obligations. You have a refrigerator close by. You might start sleeping too much, procrastinating. Our mind doesn't know where to shift its focus. You're at home. You feel like you need to do things that you would do at home. I need to do my laundry. I need to mow the lawn. I need to take the garbage out. Yet you also now are faced with this new reality of working from home. How do I talk to my boss? How do I get that social interaction? I don't have access to these key systems. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work from home. So now we've got this situation and this forcing function based on this virus that is causing stress. So we then talked about some tips to stay motivated when working at home. Wear work clothes, wake up earlier, set alarms, make lists, avoid TV. Set aside a specific area in your room, in your house, just to focus on work. And I think all that's important, but most importantly, it's important for us to develop a strategy. It is important for us to think realistic, to come up with a plan, because it's not going to happen on its own. And this is something that will take effort to be able to come up with a remote working strategy. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Again, thoughts go out to those first responders. You've been listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We'll see you next time.